So I know it's been a while since I last posted, but today I'm going to be reading the next chapter for School for Good and Evil. This book, if you forgot how it looked, I have the other chapters posted on my channel, so if you haven't read those, listen to them, then you can go to my channel, subscribe while you're at it, and listen to that chapter. So, chapter 14, The Crypt Keeper's Solution, and this is the picture that comes with it. Okay. The cover was silver silk, painted with the glowing story and clutched between black and white swans. A Student's History of the Woods, August A. Sater. Agatha opened the first page. This book reflects the views of its author only. Professor Sater's interpretation of history is his alone, and the faculty does not share it. Sincerely, Clarissa Dovey and Lady Lesso, Deans of the School for Good and Evil. Agatha felt encouraged. The faculty disapproved of the book in her hands. It gave her more hope that somewhere in these pages was the answer to the riddle. The difference between a princess and a witch. The proof good and evil were balanced. Could they be the same? She flipped the page to start, but it didn't have words. Splashed across it were patterns of embossed dots in a rainbow of colors, small as pinheads. Agatha turned the page. More dots. She tore through fistfuls of pages. No words at all. She dumped her face to the book in frustration. Sater's voice boomed. Chapter 14, The Great War. Agatha lurched up. Before her eyes, a ghostly three-dimensional scene melted into view atop the book page. A living diorama, colors gauzy like Sater's paintings in the gallery. She crouched to watch a silent vision unfold of three wizened old men, beards to the floor, standing in the schoolmaster's tower with hands united. As the old men opened their hands, the gleaming story levitated out of them and over a familiar white stone table. Sater's disembodied voice continued. Now remember, from chapter 1, the Storian was placed at the School for Good and Evil by the three seers of the Endless Woods, who believed it the only place it would be protected from corruption. Agatha gawked in disbelief. Sightless Sater couldn't write history, but he could see it, and wanted the same for his students. Every time she turned a page and touched the dots, living history came alive to his narration. Most of chapter 14 recounted what Sophie had told her at lunch, that the school had been ruled by two sorcerer brothers, one good, one evil, whose love for each other overcame their loyalties to either side. But in time, the evil brother found love give way to temptation until he saw only one obstacle between him and the pen's infinite power, his own blood. Agatha's hands swept over dots, scanning exhaustive scenes of great war battles, alliances, betrayals, to see how it all ended. Her fingers stopped as she watched a familiar figure in silver robes and mask rise out of the burning carnage of battle, story in hand. From the final fight between evil brother and good brother, a victor emerged, beholden to neither side. In the great truce, the triumphant schoolmaster vowed to rise above good and evil, and protect the balance for as long as he could keep himself alive. Neither side trusted the victor, of course, but they didn't need to. The scene flashed to the dying brother, burning to ashes as he desperately stabbed his hand into the sky, unleashing a burst of silver light. For the dying brother used his final embers of magic to create a last spell against his twin, a way to prove good and evil still equal. As long as this proof stayed intact, then the story remained uncorrupted and the woods in perfect balance. And as to what this proof is, Agatha's heart leapt. It remains in the school for good and evil to this very day. The scene went dark. She turned the page urgently to touch the dots. Sator's voice boomed. Chapter 15. The woods-wide roach plague. Agatha flung the book against the wall, then the others, leaving cracks in painted couples' faces. When there were no more to throw, she buried her face in the bed. Please, help us. Then in the silence between prayers and tears, something came. Not even a thought, an impulse. Agatha lifted her head. The answer to the riddle looked back at her. It's just a haircut, Sophie told herself as she climbed through a cornflowered thicket. No one will even notice. She slid between two periwinkle trees into the west clearing, approaching her group from behind. Just find Agatha and... The group turned all at once. No one laughed. Not Dot, not Tedros, not even Beatrix. They gaped with such horror Sophie couldn't breathe. Excuse me, something in my eye. She ducked behind a blue rosebush and gulped for air. She couldn't bear any more humiliation. At least you look like a never now, Tedros said, bobbing behind the bush. So no one makes my mistake. Sophie turned beet red. Well, that is what happens when you're friends with a witch. The prince frowned. Now Sophie was a pomegranate. Look, it's not that bad. Not as bad as your friends, at least. Excuse me, said Sophie, eggplant purple. Something in my other eye? She darted out and grabbed Dot like a life raft. Where's Agatha? But Dot was still staring at her hair. Sophie cleared her throat. Oh, they haven't let her out of her room, Dot said. Too bad she'll miss the flower ground. If Yuba can call the conductor, that is. She nodded at the gnome, grumpily jabbing at a blue pumpkin patch. Dot's eyes drifted back to Sophie's hair. It's nice. Please don't, Sophie said softly. Dot's eyes misted. You were so pretty. It'll grow back, Sophie said, trying not to cry. Don't worry, Dot sniffed. One day, someone evil enough will kill that monster. Sophie stiffened. All aboard, Yuba called. She turned to see Tedros open the top of an ordinary blue pumpkin like a teapot and vanish inside. Sophie squinted. What in the... Someone poked her hip and she looked down. Yuba thrust a flower ground pass at her and opened the pumpkin lid, revealing a thin caterpillar in a violet velvet tuxedo and matching top hat, floating in a swirl of pastel colors. No spitting, sneezing, singing, sniffling, swinging, swearing, slapping, sleeping, or urinating in the flower ground, he said in the crabbiest voice imaginable. Violations will result in removal of your clothes. All aboard. Sophie whipped to Yuba. Wait, I need to find my friend. A vine shot up and yanked her in. Too stunned to scream, she plunged through dazzling pinks, blues, yellows, as more tendrils lashed and fastened around her like safety belts. Sophie heard a hiss and wheeled to see a giant green fly trap swallow her. She found her scream before vines jerked her out of its mouth into a tunnel of hot, blinding mist and hooked her onto something that kept her moving, while her feet and arms dangled freely in the ivy harness. Then the mist cleared and Sophie saw the most magical thing she'd ever seen. It was an underground transport system, big as a whole village, made entirely of luminescent plants. Dangling passengers hung onto vine straps attached to glowing, different-colored tree trunks covered in matching flowers. These color-coded trunks were together in a colossal maze of tracks. Some trunks ran parallel, some perpendicular, some forked in different directions, but all took riders to their precise destinations in the endless woods. Sophie stared in shock at a row of unsmiling dwarves, pickaxes in belts, clinging to straps of a fluorescent red trunk labeled Rosalinda Line. Running in the opposite direction were the glittering green arboreal line, with a family of bears in crisp suits and dresses among the riders hanging off shamrock vines. Flabbergasted, Sophie peered down her hibiscus line to see the rest of her group swinging from an electric blue trunk. But only the Nevers were strapped into harnesses. "Flower grounds only for Evers," Dot called out. "They have to let us on 'cause we're with the school, but they still don't trust us." Sophie didn't care. She'd ride the flower ground for the rest of her life if she could. Besides its strong, soothing pace and delicious scents, there was an orchestra of lizards for each line. The tangerine line lizards strummed bouncy banjo guitars, the violet line ones played sultry sitars, and the lizards on Sophie's line piped up tempo jingles on piccolos, accompanied by caroling blue frogs. Lest riders grow hungry, each line had its own snacks, with bluebirds fluttering along the hibiscus line, offering blue corn muffins and blueberry punch. For once Sophie had all she needed. Muscles unclenched, she forgot about boys and beasts as vines pulled her up into a churning wind wheel of blue light. Her body felt wind, then air, then earth, and arms unfurling into the sky. Sophie bloomed out of the ground like a heavenly hyacinth, and found herself in a graveyard. Headstones the color of bleak sky swept over barren hills. Shivering classmates spouted from a hole in the ground next to her. "Where are we?" she stammered through chattering teeth. "Garden of Good and Evil," Dot shivered, nibbling a chocolate lizard. "Doesn't look like a garden to me," Sophie chattered back. Warmth thawed her skin as Yuba sparked a few small fires around the group with his magical staff. Sophie and her classmates exhaled. "In a few weeks you will each be unlocked to perform spells," said the gnome to excited titters. "But spells are no substitute for survival skills. Mere worms live near graves and can keep you alive when food is scarce. Today you'll be finding and eating them." Sophie clutched her stomach. "Off you go. Teams of 2, the gnome said. "Whichever team eats the most mealworms wins the challenge." His eyes flicked to Sophie. "Perhaps our black sheep can find redemption." Black sheep can't find anything without her girlfriend," Tedros murmured. Sophie moped miserably as he paired up with Beatrix. "Come on," Dot said, pulling Sophie to the ground. "We can beat them." Suddenly motivated, Sophie started searching the ground with Dot, careful to stay close to the fire. "What do mealworms look like?" "Like worms," said Dot. Sophie was deliberating a retort when she noticed a figure in the distance. Silhouetted atop a hill, it was a massive giant with a long black beard, thick dreadlocks, and midnight blue skin. He wore only a small brown loincloth as he tugged a row of graves. "Does it all himself, the crypt keeper," Dot said to Sophie. "That's why there's such a backlog." Sophie followed her eyes to a 2-mile line of bodies and coffins behind the crypt keeper, waiting for burial. Immediately she could see the difference between the Nevers' dark stone coffins and the Evers' coffins made of glass and gold. But there were also some bodies without caskets, just lying unattended on the hill slope beneath circling vultures. "Why doesn't he have help?" she said, nauseous. "'Cause no one can interfere with the crypt keeper's system," Fort said softly. 2 years my dad's waited," his voice cracked. "Killed by Peter Pan himself, my dad. Deserves a proper grave." Now the whole group was watching the crypt keeper dig his graves, before pulling a big book from his mass of hair and studying one of its pages. Then the giant picked up a gold coffin with the handsome prince inside and heaved it into the empty plot. He moved down the line of waiting bodies, picked up a crystal coffin with the beautiful princess, and laid it beside the prince's coffin in the same grave. Anastasia and Jacob died of starvation while on honeymoon. Avoidable deaths had they paid attention in class, Yuba snapped, grumbling. The students went back to mealworm hunting. But Sophie kept her eye on the crypt keeper, who studied his book again before picking up a coffinless ogre and plunking him in the next spot. Back to the book, and then he rested a resplendent queen's silver tome beside a matching king's. Sophie's eyes drifted around the graveyard and saw the same pattern on every hill and valley. Evers buried together with twin headstones, boy and girl, man and wife, prince and princesses. Together in life and in death, nevers buried all alone. Ever after paradise together, never more paradise alone. Sophie froze. She knew the answer to the schoolmaster's riddle. Perhaps we should search Necro Ridge, Yuba sighed. Come, students, cover for me, Sophie whispered to Dot. Dot swiveled. Where are you? Wait! Where? But Sophie was scampering through distant gravestones toward the flower-crowned entrance. Team, Dot sulked. A short while later, in the blue forest, 5 Stimps looked up from their billy goat to see Sophie brandishing an egg. Let's try this again, shall we? It was there all along. Let's try this again, shall we? It was there all along, Agatha thought as she gazed at the walls. The weapon that made good invincible against evil. The thing a villain could never have, but a princess couldn't do without. The task that would send her and Sophie home. If Sophie is alive. Agatha felt another wave of powerless dread. She couldn't just sit here while Sophie was being tortured. Screams pealed outside. She spun to see Sophie hurled through her window by a bucking Stimp. Love, Sophie panted. You're alive. You're here, Agatha gasped. Love is what a villain can never have, but a heroine can't live without. But what did they... Am I right or not? Agatha saw Sophie had no intention of talking about the Doom Room. Almost, she pointed to the paintings on the wall, with visions of heroes and heroines, lips pressed in climatic embraces. True love's kiss, Sophie breathed. If your true love kisses you, then you can't be a villain, Agatha said. And if you can't find love, then you can't be a princess, said Sophie. And we go home, Agatha swallowed. My half is taken care of. Yours isn't so simple. Oh, please, I can make any of those disgusting never-boys fall in love with me. Just give me 5 minutes, an empty broom closet, and... There's only one, Sophie, Agatha said, voice fraying. For every ever, there's only one true love. Sophie met her eyes. She collapsed onto the bed. Tedros. Agatha nodded sickly. The road home led through the one person who could ruin everything. Tedros has to kiss me, Sophie said, staring into space. And he can't be tricked, forced, or duped into it. He has to mean it. But how? He thinks I'm a villain. He hates me, Aggie. He's a king's son. He's beautiful, he's perfect. And looked at me. He's perfect. And look at me. She grabbed her shorn hair and flaccid robes. I'm still a princess. Sophie looked at her. And the only way we'll get home, said Agatha, forcing a smile. So we have to make this kiss happen. We, said Sophie. We, rasped Agatha. Sophie hugged her tight. We're going home, Aggie. But in her arms, Agatha sensed something else. Something that told her the Doom Room had taken more from her friend than just her hair. Agatha squelched her doubts and clasped Sophie tighter. One kiss and it will all be over, she whispered. As they embraced in one tower, In another, the schoolmaster watched the story and finish a magnificent painting of the two girls in each other's arms. The pen added a last flourish of words beneath it, closing the chapter. But no kiss comes without its price. Right, so that was chapter 14 of The School for Good and Evil. I really hope you enjoyed that chapter. The next chapter is called Choose Your Coffin, so I will be uploading that later. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!